So all of these molecules that we've been talking about have to be synthesized or built by living organisms or your body. There's one chemical reaction that does this. It's called dehydration synthesis. Synthesize means to make or put together. Dehydration means water is coming out. So we have a generalized animation here that shows the process. Our two monomers here on the screen could be the subunits of proteins. They could be amino acids. They could be the subunits or monomers of carbohydrates, which would make them sugars. So this reaction applies to all four molecules. And it's pretty simple. It's called dehydration synthesis because it builds the molecules from their parts, or their monomers. That's the synthesized part. And water comes out. Water is released. That's the dehydration part. So the name actually makes a lot of sense. If we want to give a more specific example, say our cells need to build a protein. They need to, the cells of your pancreas need to build insulin to control your blood sugar. This is how, in layman's terms, it works. Amino acids are joined together or put together as water comes out. And that process repeats over and over and over again. The amino acid monomers get put together to build a protein. What's it called when a bunch of monomers are joined together? Polymer, right. Same thing for carbohydrates. Instead of having amino acids as monomers, there are sugars here. But the reaction of building the polymer or the carbohydrate from its parts, its monomers, is exactly the same. Water comes out, the monomers join together to form a polymer. Questions so far? When we consume these molecules in our diet, the exact opposite reaction takes place to digest them, to chemically break them down. That's called hydrolysis. Hydro means water. Lysis is Latin for like break or purge. So the opposite reaction breaks apart the polymers into monomers when water goes in and the polymers break apart from their chain form. Same thing for protein. If we consume protein, we have to digest it, break it down. It's hydrolyzed or undergoes hydrolysis when water goes in and the chain of amino acids, the polymer, is broken down into subunits or the monomers. So let's kind of write a definition for these so we have something to refer back to. Dehydration synthesis. If you just saw an animation of this, how would you describe it or define it in your own words? Brian? Okay. When monomers join together to form polymers, and water is released. What about some examples? I'll do the first one for you. Let's say we have a bunch of sugars that undergo dehydration synthesis. Whoops. Synthesis. What would be the product, or what would come out of the reaction? Water and carbohydrates, because that's what you get when you join sugars together. And we could do this for all four of the molecules. Say we have amino acids. They undergo dehydration synthesis. What would be the outcome? What would be the product? It's called dehydration. Why? Because water always is one of the products. And then if you join a bunch of amino acid monomers together to form a polymer, what do you get? A protein. We could keep going. If we have nucleotides that undergo dehydration synthesis, what's the product? Will? Not amino acids. You got the second word right. Nucleic acids. Nucleotides are the monomers or building blocks of nucleic acids. And then the last one, if we have a glycerol and some fatty acids, those monomers undergo dehydration synthesis. What would be the product? Bless you. You can think of this chemical reaction as just a building process. So when you build a molecule from glycerol and fatty acids, what do you get? Lipids. So it's just, to think of it in really simple terms, it's the chemical reaction that builds these molecules that we've been talking about. And I probably won't go through all of these for hydrolysis, but if you know one, the other one's just the opposite. What would a definition for hydrolysis be? Well, it's not building molecules, it's what? Breaking them down. And what's the molecule called if it's got a bunch of repeating parts? We're breaking down a molecule that's called polymer into its parts, which are called monomers. Exactly. And hydro means water. If the water was coming out in dehydration synthesis, and this is the opposite, then the water has to be going in. Consumes water. And our examples would be the exact opposite. So I'm not going to go through all four. I'll just go through a couple. If we have a protein, and some water. Don't want to forget the water that is consumed. And they undergo hydrolysis. What will be the product of the reaction? So, amino acids. So you obviously recognize a pattern, I hope, by now. If we have carbs and water, they undergo hydrolysis, which is just the breaking apart of these molecules. Carbs are made of sugars, so you get the parts. If we have lipids and water, they undergo hydrolysis. You get the parts of lipids, which are fatty acids plus glycerol. And lastly, if we have a nucleic acid, a little bit of water, and this chemical reaction occurs, you get nucleotides. Bless you. Any questions about the building or dehydration synthesis of the biological molecules, or the breaking down of them, the hydrolyzing or hydrolysis of the molecules?